Thor once fought alongside the hero Alan and their group to defeat the Demon King, Gizbar. Though a key part of that battle, Thor was not known for destructive power. He was a support mage. His magic was mockingly called babysitter magic, since most people underestimated its true value. Despite the lack of recognition, Thor always fought with determination, shielding his comrades and blessing their weapons with holy power, allowing them to stand against Gizbar. A decade later, Thor works as a teacher at the Villain Magic Academy, specializing in support magic. While his former companions rose to positions as professors or associate professors, Thor remained stuck as an ordinary teacher, burdened with chores and menial tasks. He had never wanted this kind of life, but he always knew such a fate was possible. What few understand is that support magic can do far more than buff people or equipment. It can also enhance spells and even weaken enemy techniques so long as mana is involved. It's an incredibly versatile and powerful art. However, society dismisses it because offensive magic is faster at ending battles, while enchanted gear and items have replaced much of what support spells can do. Because of this, support mages are seen as little more than babysitters, and the discipline has earned a poor reputation. This prejudice has cost Thor nearly all his students. Only one remains. One day, while walking the academy halls, other teachers push their extra work onto him, even ordering him to clean the courtyard since, as they say, he has nothing better to do. Back in his office, Thor contemplates retirement, planning to finish his paperwork, clean the courtyard, and then quit. But before that, he notices a troubling scene, a group of boys harassing a girl. Looking closer, Thor realizes with shock that the victim is his sole remaining student, Raina Renetz. The one leading the harassment is none other than Gibold Zackberg. Gibold asks Raina out, but when she rejects him, he refuses to act like a gentleman. And while Thor understands the sting of rejection, he knows violence isn't the answer, so he calmly approaches and asks what the problem is. Gibold, however, laughs and mocks Thor, calling him a nobody, while his lackeys pile on, ridiculing him as a useless support mage and questioning why he's interfering when it's obvious Raina feels uncomfortable. Enraged, Gibold reminds Thor that he is the son of Count Zuck of the Empire. But Thor simply replies that he's aware and makes it clear that the Academy is a place where anyone, regardless of birth or status, is free to learn magic, dismissing Gibold's noble heritage as meaningless within its walls. This infuriates Gibold further, and he decides to attack, throwing a punch at Thor, but before it lands, Raina intercepts it, gripping his arm tightly and sending pain shooting through him. She tells Thor not to worry since she is the one being targeted, but Thor insists he cannot just stand by and watch, prompting Raina to propose a solution, a magic duel between the two of them against Gibold and his minions, assuring her opponent that if he wins, she'll marry him and grant whatever he wants. Thor is shocked by the reckless promise and reminds her that marriage is not something to be tossed around, but Raina calmly insists that as long as they win, nothing will come of it, begging him to accept. Reluctantly, Thor agrees, reasoning that victory will put an end to the harassment, while Gibold, overconfident, readily accepts, reminding Raina not to go back on her words as they all head to the training grounds. Though she ignores him and quietly tells Thor she'll handle the heavy lifting so he won't have to carry the fight. Without hesitation, Raina charges straight toward Gibold and his followers, telling Thor only to support her while she handles him directly. Thor worries she might get hurt, but when she politely questions whether his magic is too useless to protect her, he is left speechless and ultimately decides to trust her judgment. Grateful, Raina thanks him and leaps at Gibold as Thor casts a support spell on her, which she immediately feels take effect, praising the strength of his magic. Thor then shifts his focus to Gibold and his lackeys, placing a debuff on them, though Gibold fights through it and hurls a massive fireball at Raina. In response, Thor enchants her sword with a water attribute, allowing her to slice cleanly through the flames and gain an opening. Before Gibold realizes it, her blade is pressed against his throat, and she calmly asks if he still wishes to continue, warning that she could easily end the fight for good. Faced with the threat, Gibold surrenders, leaving his minions stunned since he was considered one of the Academy's top prodigies. Thor, however, is impressed by Raina's skill and graceful swordplay. As Gibold is dragged away vowing revenge, Thor suggests that he and Raina leave as well, which she agrees to, unaware that the headmaster has been observing the entire duel. Later, Thor is summoned to the headmaster's office and, to his shock, is abruptly fired. Stunned, he asks for an explanation and reminds the headmaster that he already reported the details of the incident. But the man coldly explains that he had only tolerated Thor because the previous headmaster had hired him, adding that the academy no longer has the budget to keep a teacher of support magic. The headmaster coldly tells Thor that he is useless to the academy and no longer wanted, leaving Thor stunned as though struck in the heart. Though deep down he had always expected this day to come since support magic is being discarded more and more each day. He knows the excuse about budget cuts is a lie, and the headmaster soon admits the real reason: his clash with Count Zuckerberg's son, whose father provides generous donations to the academy. Thor protests, pointing out that Gibold was extorting Reyna, a fellow student, but the headmaster slams the desk and orders him to shut up, claiming that clinging to outdated ideals will only hold the academy back. To gain funds, equipment, staff, and prestige, he insists compromises must be made, and for that reason, Thor no longer belongs there. Thor challenges him by asking if students are now judged only by wealth and status, but the headmaster, knowing he is wrong, dodges the question and instead declares that Thor must leave the academy immediately. Realizing he cannot change the man's mind, Thor makes one final plea on behalf of Reyna, only for the headmaster to shout that he doesn't care about a random student and order Thor out of his office. With no choice, Thor leaves in despair, but as he exits, he unexpectedly runs into Reyna, who had come to thank him for protecting her from Gibold. Thor gently tells her there is no need to thank him and reveals that he has just been dismissed, meaning he will only have one final lecture left with her. Reyna is shocked to learn of Thor's dismissal and quickly realizes he was fired because of her, but Thor gently shifts the blame away, admitting he had already been planning to quit. He thanks her for attending his lectures, saying he is glad he could help her, even in a small way. Yet Reyna insists she has no reason to remain at the academy if he is leaving. Thor immediately grows serious, taking hold of her and urging her not to throw her future away, reminding her of her great talent and warning her not to end up like him. Calmly, Reyna assures him she already has enough credits to graduate, shocking Thor since she is only in her second year, though he always knew she was exceptionally gifted. She admits she is worried about him, but he reassures her that she will be fine with her natural ability to learn quickly, and with that, she accepts there is no point in trying to stop him. As she departs, Thor calls after her to say he hopes the support magic he taught her will serve her well in life. The next day, Thor packs his belongings, preparing to leave the academy without regret, though he is unsure where to go since he lacks money to stay at inns. Suddenly, Reyna appears and asks about his plans, and nervously Thor says he will wander like he once did as an adventurer. At that moment, she hands him a letter, instructing him to show it to the palace guards if he ever reaches the imperial capital. Thor is stunned, believing he has no ties to the palace, but Reyna explains she has an acquaintance there who deeply respects him and might even offer him a job. Relieved, Thor accepts the letter, and the two part ways, though it is clear Reyna is hiding more than she reveals. Days later, Thor arrives at the capital, follows Reyna's instructions, and presents the letter to a palace guard, who immediately recognizes its significance, leading Thor into an audience with Emperor Heinrich. When Thor bows in respect, the Emperor surprises him by telling him to skip the formalities and meet his gaze directly. The Emperor smiled warmly and told Thor that they had been waiting for him, leaving Thor utterly confused, though the palace maids quickly escorted him inside and served him the finest cake and herbal tea. Soon after, the butler arrived and gave him a full tour of the palace, treating him with the utmost respect, which only deepened Thor's confusion as he wondered who exactly Reyna's mysterious acquaintance could be. Eventually, he was brought before Emperor Heinrich, who expressed his gratitude to Thor for aiding the Empire during its time of peril. Thor humbly replied that he had only done what any adventurer would, insisting that he was merely a support mage and that his companions had done all the true fighting. But the Emperor laughed, dismissing his modesty and declaring that he deserved far more credit. To Thor's shock, the Emperor offered him anything he desired, even a noble title, though Thor protested, explaining that Reyna's letter had only been a recommendation for a job. Heinrich assured him there was no mistake, and at that moment Princess Helena entered, revealing that she had seen Reyna's letter and that she was the friend in question. Thor was stunned to realize Reyna's acquaintance was royalty and quickly bowed, apologizing for not recognizing her status. But Helena blushed and told him there was no need for apologies. She then offered to show him to his room, promising to answer whatever questions he had, and the Emperor entrusted Thor to her care. Once they left the throne room, The two sat down to talk, and though Thor addressed her formally, Elena insisted he drop the titles and simply call her by name, something he still struggled to do out of respect. Curious, Thor asked if she truly knew him as well as Reyna had claimed, and Elena smiled, revealing that he had once saved her life, and from that moment she had admired him deeply. She confessed that beyond her admiration, she had long wished to seek his guidance, but her position as princess made it impossible, leaving her envious of Reyna, who had the chance to study with him so freely. Thor is flattered by the princess's words, but humbly admits that his abilities may not be as impressive as she believes, only for Elena to gently insist that he stop being so modest, explaining that Reyna had already told her this about him, and had even mentioned how engaging his lectures were. Shocked to hear his classes described as interesting, Thor feels an overwhelming happiness as memories of teaching Reyna flood his mind, nearly bringing him to tears when Elena suddenly asks if he is seeking a job. Thor admits that he is, explaining that he is simply looking for honest work to do, and with so many people in the imperial capital, he hopes to find something suitable. Hearing this, Elena surprises him with a formal offer to become a court magician. Thor is stunned by the proposal and asks her to confirm, which she does, explaining that he would serve in the court to resolve any magical issues within the empire, with housing and food provided and a salary of 100 gold coins. Thor breaks into a sweat at the sum, knowing that a single gold coin is enough to support one person for a month, and nervously mutters this aloud, only for Elena to smile and add that his salary would even be paid in advance. Completely overwhelmed, Thor grows suspicious and asks what she really wants from him, and Elena drops a shocking request. She wants him to marry her. The words hit Thor like a hammer, leaving him speechless, and though he does not take the proposal seriously, assuming it to be a joke, he still recalls that he already accepted the palace's hospitality, leaving him indebted and wary of how to proceed. Later, as he reaches the entrance to his assigned room, he finds a girl waiting for him, who excitedly greets him and claims she has been waiting. Taking a closer look, Thor is stunned to recognize Reyna, who assures him that she truly is the same Reyna he knows, prompting Thor to ask in disbelief if she really quit the academy. Reyna explains that while she quit the academy, she still earned her graduation qualifications, but she could no longer remain there once Thor was gone, since he was the only reason she stayed. Thor is moved to tears, shocked that she went so far just because of his support magic, and he thanks her, admitting that his position as court mage was only possible because of her, though he still feels Elena's expectations of him are far too high. Reyna reassures him that he will do fine and promises to support him with everything she has, which confuses Thor until she reveals that she herself is also a court mage, sent by Princess Elena to the academy in order to sharpen her skills for royal duty. Thor worries Elena might be angry at her for leaving, but Reyna reveals the truth, that it was Elena herself who instructed her to take Thor's lectures, meaning she has nothing to fear. With a bright smile, she assures Thor that he can rely on her, and though he nervously promises to do his best, Reyna insists he drop the formalities since she is now his assistant. Thor is shocked by the idea of having her as an assistant, but she silences his protests, so he reluctantly agrees and asks what exactly a court mage does. Excitedly, Reyna explains that he is free to do as he pleases, take holidays, shop, or relax without needing permission. Though Thor is baffled that such leisure could be called work, Reyna laughs, blaming Elena, and clarifies that court mages serve the princess and the royal family directly, though Elena rarely assigns them tasks. In times of war, however, they fall under the orders of a division commander. Realizing this means they are often idle unless summoned. Thor nods in understanding, and Reyna proposes they go meet the commander. Thor agrees, saying it's wise to know one's superiors, so she leads him to an office, knocks, and introduces herself. A voice inside grants them entry, and when they step in, they find a plump man seated on a chair, flanked by two women, the deputy commander, Benaid and Zoxberg. Reyna, clearly not fond of Badon, introduces Thor as a newly appointed court mage, which shocks Badon since he claims to have heard nothing about such an assignment. He questions Reyna as well, saying he has never seen her before, so she explains that she became a court mage 3 years ago and proves it by showing her badge, which finally convinces him. Still, Badon looks down on her, dismissing her chances of receiving important duties, before turning to Thor and demanding to know who hired him. When Reyna states that the princess herself appointed him, Badon insists he has received no word of it, which Reyna expected and why they sought out the division commander. Badon explains that the commander is absent and that he is currently in charge, prompting Reyna, despite her dislike for him, to politely say they look forward to working with him. Badon, however, smugly declares that he has not yet agreed to accept Thor, since recruitment is his responsibility, implying no one can become a court mage without his approval. Shocked, Reyna asks if he is defying the princess's authority, but Badon twists the matter, claiming he is only being cautious about hiring someone unknown. Though Reyna admits that his reasoning sounds valid, she argues that opposing the princess undermines the very authority of the court mages, then declares that speaking to a mere deputy commander is pointless and suggests they leave. This angers Badon, but before things escalate, Thor calmly steps in, asking if Badon's intention is to test his abilities to see if he is fit for the role. Badon sneers that Thor looks useless, but agrees, saying he will allow a test only because Thor asked politely. When he demands to know Thor's specialty, Thor reveals that he uses support magic, which makes Badon burst out laughing, exactly as Thor expected. So he firmly requests a chance to prove what he can do. Thor promises to step down if his abilities prove inadequate, and though Badon thinks it over, he reluctantly agrees, revealing that the school is about to conduct its recruitment examination. He orders Thor to demonstrate his skills during the exam, and Thor bows respectfully, assuring him that he will do his best, only for Badon to laugh mockingly, warning him not to get overconfident and die in the process. Soon after, the applicants gather for the examination, and while the bell rings endlessly for an hour without progress, Thor notices Giblet among the participants, loudly trash-talking a female candidate. Standing beside him is none other than Deputy Commander Badon, his arrogant father, who reassures Gibble that Reyna poses no threat. Gibble brags about being the future division commander, but his confidence crumbles the instant he spots Thor standing with Reyna. Sweat pours down his face as he recalls their duel at the academy, and in sudden fear he rushes to his father, declaring that he is abandoning his dream of becoming a court mage. Shocked, Badon grabs him, demanding he stop spouting nonsense, but Gibble only repeats that he is finished. Furious and confused, Badon glares at Thor, demanding to know what he did to his son, but Thor raises a hand innocently, explaining that they merely had a duel back at the academy. This revelation enrages Badon even more, while his cowardly son hides behind him. Badon then snaps at Thor, announcing there is no need to continue waiting for the examination since it will now serve to test Thor's abilities alone. Raising his hand to formally declare the exam begun, he turns to Thor with a sneer, declaring that he himself will be the one to test him personally. Thor decides to play along, politely asking Badon to take care of him. But since court mages are known for their support of magic and Badon already knows Thor specializes in that field, he prepares a test to humiliate him. Standing behind Badon is a knight named Velger, and he introduces the newest recruit from the Royal Knights, who had received the lowest battle evaluation. Badon announces that Thor will be paired with this recruit, a shield-bearing warrior, and together they will face Velger and Gibbold. The recruit is stunned by this arrangement, and even Reyna is shocked, knowing Velger's reputation as an exceptionally strong fighter despite being only 20 years old. Reyna protests that sending Velger against a rookie is far too much, but Badon brushes it off, saying victory will not be the only condition and that he will be lenient in the assessment. Thor then turns to his teammate and introduces himself, while the frightened young woman stammers out her name as Mia Valberg, eldest daughter of Baron Valberg. She explains that she passed the Royal Knights exam in the provinces 6 months ago and only arrived in the capital the previous day, where she took an assessment and ranked near the bottom. Reyna bluntly explains that Mia is skilled with a shield but struggles to complete missions alone, making her a candidate for dismissal, which shocks Thor as he warns Reyna that some things are better left unsaid. However, Mia admits nervously that everything Reyna said is true, adding that Velger is considered second only to the Knight Commander, which shows how dangerous he is. She doesn't mind being dismissed but fears dragging Thor down with her, until Reyna sternly tells her to stop underestimating herself and assures her that with Thor on their side, they won't lose. Flustered, Thor tries to support Reyna's confidence, nervously telling Mia that they will be fine, promising to do his best to secure victory, and urging her to give her all. Encouraged by his words, Mia finds motivation, clenches her fist, and promises Thor that she will also do her best. Badon scolds Gibbold when he notices his son trembling in fear, but Gibbold admits he is terrified of facing the scary Lady Reyna. calling her dangerous. Badon quickly reassures him, explaining that Reyna is not his opponent and that he will only be fighting Mia, nobody, in support mage, while insisting that he and Velger are unbeatable. Grinning wickedly, Badon tells his son he cannot possibly lose and even grants him permission to kill his opponents if he wishes, which makes Gibold beam with confidence as he vows to crush both Thor and Mia. Velger, however, remains cautious. Though he acknowledges Gibold's potential, he knows the boy is far from the warrior he believes himself to be, and his instincts warn him that Thor is someone dangerous who should not be underestimated. Badon officially announces that the examination will take place in a full battle format where participants may use any magic or weapons at their disposal, adding that surrender is allowed only if one admits defeat. He smirks while glancing at Thor and Mia, certain of their downfall. Reyna, however, grows tense, aware of Velger's fearsome reputation as the knight who once slew 2 dragons, earning him the title of a true hero. To her, he is the strongest possible opponent, and Badon is equally confident, believing Velger's strength and his son's unmatched fire magic make them unstoppable, with only the Knight Commander capable of rivaling them. The duel begins with Gibold hurling a massive fireball while shouting at Thor that he is unafraid of him as long as Reyna is absent. Thor immediately yells at Mia to hold her ground, assuring her that he can deal with the fire spell, knowing that flame magic can be rendered useless if prevented from landing. His strategy is to delay the casting and then fully disperse the attack. So he quickly targets Gibold's fireball with a purging spell, making the flaming sphere vanish instantly. Gibold is left stunned, questioning how his attack could be erased so easily. But before he can recover, Velger charges past him, aiming a powerful strike. Mia reacts in time, raising her shield to block the blow, proving her worth in defense. Velger's suspicions are confirmed, realizing Thor is no ordinary mage, and with a sharp glint in his eyes, he announces that he will fight seriously, warning Mia not to take what comes next too personally. Thor realizes that equipment often resists debuffs, so instead of trying to weaken Velger, he shifts his focus to boosting Mia's strength. He casts a spell on her and her shield, assuring her that it has been reinforced enough to withstand Velger's mighty greatsword. Mia thanks him, but when Velger charges forward with a golden aura slash, she panics. The blow crashes against her shield, yet thanks to Thor's support, she manages to hold her ground. Thor quickly notices that Velger's relentless strikes will eventually overwhelm Mia, so he decides to eliminate the easier threat first. Turning to Gibold, Thor casually casts a spell that knocks him unconscious, shocking Badon as his son collapses. Enraged, Badon tries to halt the duel, but Reyna silently appears behind him and seals his voice with a spell, forcing the fight to continue. Velger keeps hammering at Mia's shield with rapid slashes, and when Thor attempts to slow him with magic, Velger's swordsmanship cancels the spell before it can activate. Unable to debuff him, Thor switches tactics again, casting an acceleration spell on Mia and urging her to swing her mace with full strength. Following his command, Mia smashes her weapon into the ground, producing a radiant light. Velger scoffs at the attack, dismissing it as too weak, and sidesteps before darting straight toward Thor at blinding speed. Prepared, Thor had already set a counterspell in the area, and when Velger's blade strikes, it shatters into fragments upon impact. Stunned, Velger realizes that Thor's magic completely neutralized his weapon and, humbled, concedes defeat, admitting that Thor's mastery as a mage is on an entirely different level. Mia, on the other hand, feels that she still has a long way to go in her training, but Velger commends her efforts and urges her to work even harder the next day. He then orders them to return to headquarters, and Mia, smiling brightly, acknowledges his command, glances back at Thor with gratitude, and bows before leaving. Ray rushes to Thor to celebrate his victory, congratulating him for passing the exam, and Thor thanks her sincerely. Suddenly, Badon yells that the exam isn't over yet, declaring that one match isn't enough, and Thor must pass the next trial or abandon his dream of becoming a court mage. Though both Thor and Ray are disappointed, Thor doesn't argue and calmly assures Badon that he's prepared to face the next challenge because he wants to test his true strength and confirm his worthiness as a court mage. Badon grins at his resolve and points to a mage, ordering her to fight Thor and even kill him if necessary. The mage turns out to be Luna, another court mage, who questions why she should fight him. Badon reminds her that she's the commander's daughter and insists she must set an example, But Luna coldly replies that she doesn't even acknowledge the commander as her father. Shocked, Badon asks if she's really willing to disgrace him. But Luna scoffs and tells him to fight Thor himself, adding that Thor looks so weak he isn't worth her time. However, Badon cunningly manipulates her, and Luna finally agrees, saying she'll use the fight as a way to blow off steam. Relieved, Badon knows how powerful Luna truly is. Annoying and rebellious. Yes, but undeniably one of the strongest court mages. In his mind, he is certain she won't lose to a mere support mage like Thor, and even considers an opportunity to both crush Thor and bury the commander's troublesome daughter at the same time. Luna approaches Thor and asks if he is the applicant, remarking that he already looks old, to which Thor calmly replies yes, noting that she is channeling mana into her staff, a sign of an experienced mage. Hearing this, Luna blushes and praises him for not treating her like a child, while Ray scolds her for being rude and calling Thor old on their first meeting. Tension rises as Ray further reminds Luna that she should properly introduce herself and show respect to strangers, since that is what makes a true adult. Luna responds with anger, screaming in frustration, but Thor steps in between them to calm the situation. Because of his intervention, Luna reluctantly forgives Ray yet still insists on calling Thor an old man, before finally introducing herself and declaring that Thor must fight her to pass the exam. She explains the rules, saying whoever first grazes the other with magic will be considered the winner, and since she is free to fight however she wants, Thor may also do whatever he likes. The duel begins with Thor making the first move, combining wind and water magic to attack Luna. She plays around at first until the spell strikes her, leaving her body drenched and shocking her. But even more surprising is when Ray raises Thor's hand and declares him the winner. Luna protests that she only let her guard down, yet Ray reminds her that since she herself set the rule that the first strike wins, Thor has won fairly. Badon furiously objects, saying he has not even taken his position as judge and demand a rematch. Thor then asks Ray if she would allow another round against Luna, but Ray, unimpressed with Luna's carelessness, hesitates until Thor insists that the first duel didn't display his true strength. Forced by Thor's determination, Ray finally agrees, and Luna warns him she will not be holding back this time. Thor accepts, promising to fight with his full strength as well. Luna's staff glows with a radiant green aura while Thor casts his spell. To prepare, already realizing that direct debuffs will not work if she is as strong or stronger than Velgar. So he attempts to cancel her magic with the same type, but quickly understands that the gap in power may make that nearly impossible. Luna unleashes a powerful spell at Thor, declaring that the real fight is only beginning, and she casts a massive water spell called Mega Aqua. As the overwhelming energy surges toward him, Thor debates whether he should dim its strength with support magic, but Luna shocks everyone by firing off a series of extremely high-level elemental spells one after another, showing off her versatility. Instead of being frightened, Thor finds himself impressed, realizing that Luna reminds him of someone from his past, a former adventuring companion who had started learning magic at the same time as him, but quickly surpassed him in skill and talent. Though Thor had once felt jealous, he accepted that he lacked exceptional power and decided instead to dedicate himself entirely to support magic, using his strength to protect his teammates and help them shine. This choice left him overlooked and labeled as useless, but it was the path he committed to. Shaking off the memories, Thor returns his focus to the duel as Luna grows increasingly frustrated that he can predict her every move. She fires another spell, only to fumble the cast in her irritation, then launches a lightning strike in desperation, forcing Thor to dodge quickly. Yet this plays right into his strategy. He activates a stealth spell followed by acceleration magic, cloaking his presence and blinding Luna to his movements. Disoriented and unable to sense her opponent, Luna is left wide open as Thor swiftly closes the distance and strikes from her blind spot, sending a gust of air that blows her clothes aside and embarrassingly reveals her undergarments. At that moment, Ray quickly raises her hand to stop the duel and firmly declares Thor the winner, a verdict Luna cannot contest despite her frustration. Luna realizes too late that covering her mouth had blocked her own vision, creating a blind spot she hadn't even noticed, while Thor, though glad for the victory, isn't fully impressed since he knows he only won because of his greater combat experience, admitting to himself that Luna could have overpowered him with brute force if she had chosen to. This leaves him questioning whether he truly deserves the title of court mage. But before he can dwell on it, Banan decides to make his move, releasing a thunderstrike lightning spell that manifests in the air and shocks Thor when he notices the magic circle is still active, its energy now aimed directly at Luna. For a moment, he wonders if the spell had gone out of control, but instead of wasting time figuring it out, he focuses on saving her, rushing toward Luna and shouting for her to throw her staff upward. Confused, she hesitates, but Thor casts a levitation spell and accelerates its effect, urging her again until she finally obeys, tossing the staff into the active magic circle where it reacts instantly and dispels the incoming strike. Thor reaches her just in time and sweeps her into his arms, carrying her like a bride, which makes Luna blush furiously as she stammers excuses about how she could have handled it herself, though her embarrassment only grows when she realizes everyone is watching. So she angrily demands to be put down and boasts that he shouldn't think he won just because he saved her, promising to utterly dominate him in their next fight before walking off. Thor can only watch in disbelief at her antics, while Badon fumes in frustration, refusing to acknowledge Thor's success and vowing never to accept him. But his smugness is short-lived as knights in golden armor suddenly arrive at the venue, carrying a royal decree ordering his arrest. They announce that Badon has been charged with embezzlement of public funds, bribery of the Magic University, and abuse of power within the court mage division, declaring that his misdeeds have finally caught up with him. And without delay, they place him in chains as his downfall begins. Badon is stunned by the sudden turn of events and desperately tries to plead his innocence. But the knights ignore his protests and order him to be taken away to face judgment before the Emperor, while he continues shouting that he has done nothing wrong. Ray, watching him dragged off, feels disappointed that he had sunk so low as to commit the crimes he's accused of, while Thor can't help but lament that a man with enough skill to rise to vice commander had thrown his career away through corruption. Ray quickly shifts Thor's focus, telling him to forget about such a man and congratulating him for passing the exam, reminding him that not only was he appointed by the princess, but he also cleared the trials fairly. And with his support magic that surpasses all others, he is more than qualified to be a court mage. Later, Thor retires to his room, letting out a sigh of relief that he managed to pass, even if the exam wasn't a formal one. But while reflecting on the day's events, he hears a voice at the door asking permission to enter. Believing it to be Reyna, he casually tells her to come in, only to be surprised when Elena steps inside, apologizing for the vice commander's disgraceful behavior. Flustered at having misjudged the voice, Thor hastily uses an acceleration spell to spring from his bed, but in his rush, he stubs his foot painfully before managing to bow before her. Elena gently tells him there's no need for such formality, and when Thor offers her a seat, she accepts, settling down as he nervously asks if she had summoned him. She replies no, prompting Thor to admit that he assumed she must be disappointed in the exam and confessing his own doubts about whether he is truly fit to serve as a court mage, though he is at least glad to have passed. Elena asks how he feels, and Thor, blushing, admits that he can manage, while also expressing his excitement at being in the palace surrounded by other talented mages. Elena tells Thor that she was impressed by his display of magic, admitting that she had been watching from a distance and thought he looked cool throughout the exam, even adding that she has also grown fond of Luna. Thor is taken aback by her praise, as he never imagined anyone would find his magic cool, and he blushes from embarrassment since compliments like this are new to him. Elena encourages him to stop being modest, reminding him that he is skilled and should have more confidence in himself. Before leaving, she tells Thor that he is free to ask for anything, assuring him that Reyna holds him in high esteem and has promised to support him in every way possible. She then reminds him of what she said during their last meeting, which makes Thor realize she had actually proposed marriage to him, leaving him flustered. After Elena leaves, Ray enters with a chiffon cake she baked to celebrate Thor's success. She smiles warmly as she offers him some, and after tasting it, Thor praises the cake as delicious, making Ray blush with joy. While Thor is grateful for her kindness, he secretly worries she might be disappointed once they begin working together, though he still hopes she will always see him as cool. Thor vows to do his best, but Ray reassures him that he is already doing more than enough and promises to keep cheering him on, which makes him tear up with joy again. Ray offers him another slice, and he gladly accepts. Later that night, Elena, now alone in her room, finds herself daydreaming about Thor. With all the maids retired, she pulls out a sketchbook dedicated to him and blushes as she draws his portrait, gushing over how great he was during the exam and how captivated she was by every one of his expressions. To make sure she never forgets Thor's every expression, Elena carefully sketches everything in her special book, even illustrating the moment when he saved Luna, though she imagines replacing Luna with herself, or maybe even Reyna. She calls Thor her ultimate teacher, someone who deserves all the happiness in the world. In the corner of the sketchbook, however, sits a clumsy doodle of Gibble and his annoying father. While Elena dreams of marrying Thor, she first wants to help him obtain a noble title, leaving the decision of marriage up to him. As she lies in bed before sleep, she wonders what else she might bake for him. Meanwhile, Thor is officially inducted as one of the court mages, though most of the others are displeased, believing the exam was unfair and that the vice commander had been wrongly accused. Only Ray seems truly happy for him. Thor, however, feels guilty, telling Ray that someone as talented as her shouldn't waste time on him, but she reassures him of her promise to support him. Thor clarifies that he meant something different. He wants her to give him actual work, like weeding or cleaning, so he has a reason for earning such a large salary. Ray explains there's no need since servants handle those tasks, but Thor struggles with the idea of receiving 100 gold coins for seemingly nothing, fearing he will feel like a freeloader. Understanding his worries, Ray tells him about the freelance commission board at the court mage office and offers to guide him. On the way, Thor asks what freelance commissions are, prompting Ray to explain that they are jobs too difficult for ordinary adventurers or guards. Major ones become official royal missions, while the rest remain freelance tasks for mages and knights to take on. When they arrive, they scan the board, finding missions like or mining paid by yield, dragon dung collection with a set quota worth 100 silvers, and even a risky drug testing job that pays 20 gold coins. Among the listed tasks, there is also a simple shopping mission in a neighboring country that pays just 1 gold coin due to its lack of danger. Thor isn't surprised by such listings, but Ray points out that the rewards often don't match the effort required. Still, Thor notices a particularly urgent request from the mayor of Rogat village, where for 2 years crops have been absorbing poison and dying, forcing the villagers to survive on public grain. Though adventurers have already investigated without success, the problem hasn't yet escalated to the total collapse of the village. Ray is shocked that such a matter is classified as a freelance mission instead of a royal one. But Thor decides to accept it anyway, determined to see if he can help. Other court mages overhear and mock him, ridiculing the paltry 1 gold reward and predicting that he'll return empty-handed. Ray hears their jeers, but Thor reassures her, saying that helping people is reward enough for him. She smiles at his sincerity, remarking that he stands above the petty mages, which makes Thor blush as he gently asks her not to provoke the others. Soon after, Thor and Ray set off for the village. Though it lies fairly close to the capital, the journey takes about 2 hours. Along the way, Ray expresses confidence that Thor's support magic will prove invaluable in aiding the villagers, especially since depopulation, drought, and failed harvest have plagued the area. Upon arrival, they are met by a guard at the entrance before being introduced to the mayor, Graba, who is astonished that court mages actually came. Grateful, he bows deeply, but Thor quickly urges him to rise and not humble himself so much. Graba then leads them directly to the village's crop fields. Thor examines the fields and realizes the situation is far worse than he imagined. Graba confirms this, explaining that wind, water, and even the soil have all been tested with no results, leading the villagers to believe they must have angered the holy tree. They've been praying daily for forgiveness, but Thor focuses on the fact that the massive tree in the middle of the fields remains unaffected. Instead of accepting superstition, he insists they must trace the source of the poison. Though Graba says previous investigations failed, Ray reassures him that Thor is capable of solving the mystery. Finding the ideal spot to work, Thor tells Ray they will return to the capital that evening, then casts a purification spell designed to remove and block poison. To everyone's shock, the blight vanishes instantly. But the relief is short-lived as the plants quickly turn purple again, revealing the poison is still flowing in. Thor tracks its direction and discovers it points toward the holy tree. Graba is stunned, protesting that the sacred tree, over 2,000 years old and the village's spiritual foundation, could never be responsible. He notes that officials have examined it before and found nothing wrong, and insists villagers rarely go near it. Thor respects their reverence, promising not to harm the tree, but explains that the signs cannot be ignored. He proposes casting another purification spell from a distance. And though hesitant, Graba finally agrees as long as the tree itself remains untouched. Thor raises his hand toward the holy tree and casts a purification spell, but instead of cleansing it, the spell provokes a reaction. From beneath the roots, a creature emerges. Thor realizes with shock that it's a trant, a monster formed when a dryad spirit possesses a tree. Normally, trants are weak, but this one is enormous, its strength amplified by the ancient tree that hosts it. The tree twists into a towering monster, radiating a suffocating purple aura. Thor immediately casts an acceleration spell on Graba, ordering him to flee back to the village and suggests retreating, but when he turns, he sees Rei drawing her sword, prepare to fight. She tells him not to worry about her and urges him to focus on whatever support he can give. Thor recognizes the same fierce aura he felt from her when they fought Jibble at school, realizing her swordsmanship far exceeds that of an ordinary mage. Knowing that trants usually require S-rank adventurers, Thor resolves to back her up. He strengthens her speed with acceleration magic as she lunges at the creature, but roots erupt from the ground. Thor's sharp warning gives Rei just enough time to slash them apart. He deduces the roots are a weak point and casts slowing magic on the trant while boosting Rei's movements, allowing her to dart around within human speed. Even so, he doubts they have enough strength to bring it down. As the battle rages, Thor notices her sword techniques feel familiar, though he forces himself to stay focused. He directs her to target the body while he handles the roots, impressed that she instinctively follows his unspoken plan. Thor acknowledges to himself that Rei is one of the finest swordsmen he's ever met. Rei vaults into the air, studying the trant's body structure, but when she slashes its thick branch-like arms, her blade barely makes a dent. Thor sees the danger. It's like being smashed by a wall, and quickly channels a spell directly into Rei's sword from a distance. Despite how far she is, his magic connects perfectly, imbuing her weapon with power. Rei, astonished, praises his precision and strength, impressed that he could enhance her weapon so effectively mid-battle. With Thor's enchantment fueling her blade, Rei unleashes a flurry of blazing strikes across the trant's massive body, each cut trailing fire. Yet, despite the relentless assault, the monster refuses to fall, leaving Thor stunned. Any ordinary trant would have been obliterated already. Rei pulls back, and the two hear a piercing screech from the creature. Confused, she steadies her stance, while Thor notices a watery liquid oozing from the bark. At first he assumes it's sap, but quickly realizes it's actually water. He deduces that the trant is siphoning moisture from the farmland's abundant reserves to extinguish the flames clinging to its body. Rei clicks her tongue, remarking on the tree's cunning. Though its surface looks charred, Thor knows it's only superficial damage. The thick bark remains intact. He's impressed at how cleverly the trant deceived villagers and investigators for 2 whole years. Thinking quickly, he tells Rei to switch her flame veil to ice. She doesn't fully understand at first, but the trant attacks, forcing her to act. With her sharp instincts, she pieces together Thor's plan, reignites her flame veil, and, boosted by acceleration magic, launches herself forward. The water-soaked trant laughs, as if mocking her for using the same tactic, its arrogance filling the air. Thor can't help but smirk at the absurdity of a laughing tree, but he knows it's already fallen for the trap. Its overconfidence in storing water will be its undoing. As Rei charges, she shouts that she's ready. Thor acknowledges the monster's intelligence, but reminds himself that he's a seasoned academy professor, not someone who'll be outwitted by a tree. At the crucial moment, he casts a rare switching spell, changing Rei's sword from fire to ice. She gasps in disbelief. This spell has only a 10% success rate, even for skilled mages, yet Thor executes it effortlessly, leaving her awestruck. Rei screams at the top of her voice, calling her teacher awesome, as she strikes the trant with an ice-powered attack that freezes the water inside and outside its body, restricting its movements and stopping it from drawing up more water, leaving the final blow to them. Thor quickly switches her sword's element from ice to fire, and Rei unleashes a flame veil that sets the frozen trant ablaze, certain that its core will burn out before it can extinguish the fire. Her brilliant swordsmanship, combined with Thor's relentless support spells, engulfs the monster in flames, and the cheering villagers raise their hands in celebration of the trant's defeat. Exhausted, Thor collapses to the ground, smiling with satisfaction as he downplays his role, claiming all he did was cast support, while Ray, shocked at his praise, insists he was the one who did all the work. The villagers, however, rush to Reyna, calling her amazing with his sword, leaving her flustered as she tries to correct them. But they only see Thor as a tired man. When she urges him to speak, Thor simply tells her she was cool, just before Mayor Graba arrives. Thor bows an apology for the loss of the sacred tree, but the mayor reassures him there is no need since the tree had long been corrupted by evil, admitting it was their own fault for not realizing it sooner. Thor warns Graba that the tree will soon collapse since its roots have been dug up, and he quickly realizes the fire could cause more damage if not controlled. The villagers agree to cut it down and, without hesitation, take up their axes, chopping apart their once sacred tree until it finally crashes to the ground. They thank Thor and Reyna for staying behind to help deal with the aftermath, as their efforts ensured the fire was safely extinguished. Though Graba apologizes that the mission reward is small, Thor reassures him not to worry, reminding him that Princess Elena has already compensated them, a remark that makes Reyna's face flush red beneath her glasses. As a gesture of gratitude, Graba offers Thor the ashes and charcoal from the fallen tree, already packed in hemp bags to be delivered later. Ray is thrilled, knowing that the ashes of a sacred tree are precious for medicines and potions, worth their weight in gold in the capital. Graba admits he had planned to sell them to fund village repairs, but fears flooding the market at once would crash the price. Thor instead casts a growth-enhancing spell on the ashes so they can serve as fertilizer, asking Graba to use them to restore the village, since the tree had long protected it. Graba agrees, but refuses to treat it as a reward, so Thor calls it a donation for reconstruction. While working, he reminds them that natural magic is not his specialty, so the results won't be extraordinary. Ray then asks if the Trant ever attacked villagers during the 2 years it stood there, and Graba replies no. Thor explains that all monsters naturally seek to harm people, so the Trant's restraint meant the sacred tree's spirit still lingered, protecting the village to the very end. Realizing this, the villagers bow to the charred remains, giving thanks to their guardian one last time. Afterward, Thor and Reyna take their leave, with the villagers bowing deeply and thanking them as they pass through the village gates. Graba reflects that both Thor and Reyna are truly kind people, noting how most adventurers would never stay to help at the aftermath. Suddenly, a villager rushes to the mayor, reporting an emergency. Graba follows and is stunned to see that in the spot where Thor's ashes have been scattered, plants are already sprouting within minutes, growing right before their eyes. The villagers immediately take this as a blessing from their sacred tree. Meanwhile, on the road to the capital, Ray struggles with the praise lavished on her by the villagers, unable to believe they compare her to Princess Elena. Her original plan had been to help Thor gain recognition and fame, but she feels she is stealing the spotlight instead. Just then, Thor calls her name and, to her shock, apologizes. Ray is bewildered and asks why, and Thor admits he regrets making her handle the aftermath without asking her first, as well as keeping her overnight in the village. Blushing, Ray happily reassures him that she didn't mind spending the night by his side. Relieved, Thor says he can tell how worried she has been, but Ray urges him not to concern himself and confesses she is only a little tired. Thor wishes her a quick recovery, and Ray, smiling warmly like a teddy bear, thanks him for his kindness. She reflects on evaluating the fertilizer in a few months, confident that even if results take time, it will count as one of Thor's achievements and help him earn the villagers' trust. With determination, she resolves to do everything she can to ensure Thor's power is recognized by all, when suddenly, the thought of marrying him slips into her mind.